Just talking about how my car warrant is due and how relevant that is to today's topic, just that being well prepared, not just in yourself, but also, in terms of preparing your vehicle for the school holiday, for the Christmas or summer holidays. And I was just saying to Katrina, I'm making sure that I'm getting 2 new tires, even though they could be stretched. It's not worth it. I think it's worth getting them now. Just a reminder for everybody else to check their watches. All right. As per normal, team, today's webinar is recording, and the recording will be available to those on the call today and also to others to view afterwards. We do publish these both on the YouTube channel and also on Spotify, so you can either do the video or the audio. And there are other topics up there that you can go back and have a look over the year. We've had a long list of illustrious guests this year. A lot of the FleetFit partners have actually featured, and we've talked about various activities that we've worked on together and topics that our customers and industry are telling us are really important. So you can find all of those if you go to the Success Formula website, look under the blog, and there's one there about lunch and learns, and that's where we've popped up all of the recordings that you can go back and have a look at. All right, it is time, so let us jump in and get started. Thank you. Welcome along to everyone today to a webinar to talk about surviving the peak season, effective fatigue management. It's obviously a challenging time of the year as we get into the peak for a lot of transport and logistics operators, but also as my guest and I today are going to talk about, there's a lot of other factors that are going on that are influencing this being a particularly risky time of the year. Before we jump into the topic, I'd just like to introduce today's special guest. We've got Katrina Aubrey along with me. Hi, Katrina, welcome.
Hi, hello, fellow viewers and listeners. Nice to be here today.
Katrina, we have the privilege of working with you now as one of the, involved in the FleetFit partners. As you know, this webinar is sponsored by NZI. Would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself? What do you do?
Yes, so I've been working in the health industry for the last 23 years. I guess that's showing my age just a little bit. I've worked in a variety of areas, but I have in the last 8 years found my calling working in sleep, and then more recently sleep and fatigue management. And I am from Perth. I've been over in New Zealand for the last 8 years, and New Zealand's definitely now my new home.
Yeah, fantastic. I'm actually going to Perth on Monday, by the way.
Oh, fantastic.
So, Katrina, this topic, surviving the peak season and fatigue management, super, super relevant to the customers that we're working with. In the preparation, we listed some of those reasons why this is such a dangerous time of the year. AutoSense, one of our other partners, have recently promoted the latest Guardian report. And I found that super interesting that it highlighted that November was actually the month of the year that they had the highest number of Guardian fatigue events, which I found actually surprising. I thought it would have been December or even maybe January. But what are some of the other reasons that this is a dangerous time of the year from your perspective?
Yeah, well, part of that report showed that 43% of drivers are actually having micro sleeps within the first 2 hours of starting shift. And I mean, that is just mind blowing. And I guess, first of all, it's painting that bigger picture of why we got sleepy drivers on the road, within 2 hours of starting shift. And for me, obviously, in the sleep medicine field, I would love to be talking more about how is their sleep? Are they sleeping enough? And is the quality there? But obviously as well, we've just got a lot going on in our mind this time of the year. We're going to try find that as best as we can work-life balance. We've got children finishing school, as you've sort of mentioned earlier. We've got challenging deadlines to meet for work before the end of the year comes, and then fitting in all the social things with family and friends in between. So I guess I feel as though our minds are very much distracted, and we're under a lot of pressure at this time of the year to make the end of the year work smoothly as best we can, both at work and in our personal life.
And I know that or even how I'm feeling in myself, it's a cumulative effect. You know, we're getting to that peak period, trying to get everything done, you know, the load of planning holidays and school, dealing with school children and all of that. But it's also the impact of those things, isn't it, over the year that build up from a mental fatigue perspective, but also a physical fatigue perspective. Longer day, summer days, we're often staying up later, more barbecues, whatever it might be. So it makes sense that not only our drivers are fatigued, but our managers are fatigued as well. And as you would have heard, many of you would have heard me speak about before with the harm-free transport logistics program we're involved in, the way that work is both designed and managed has a huge impact on the drivers. And so where the managers are fatigued, we know when we get tired, we have less patience, we're less tolerant, we're less, you know, our decision-making skills are impaired. And all of that applies to the managers and the pressure that they potentially inadvertently put onto the drivers, right?
It's so true. And the scary thing is, Kelly, that often you don't recognize your own fatigue levels. And so it's so important to bring out this, I guess, sleep and fatigue positive culture in the workplace, that actually you might feel like you're on top of your own fatigue, but we're counting on you to recognize fatigue of your work colleagues and your managers. There are reports out there that are showing it's the managers firstly that are going to be fatigued before we get that ripple effect throughout the rest of the organization. So it's just, you know, a subject so close to my heart that it's a bit like a driver that's been drinking for a few hours at the pub and says, I'm okay to drive home, I feel fine. And they can't actually, you know, evaluate their own drunkenness levels, and fatigue's exactly like that. You just feel like you're fine, but actually, as the Guardian is showing, there is a lot of microsleeps happening where you still feel like you're fine, but you're actually not.
Yeah.
And that's that fatigue stepping in.
Yeah, and so I had in my notes here, maybe we needed to define fatigue, and I'm sure just looking at the names on the list, it's not an unfamiliar concept to anyone here today. But I think that's a really important point about it being something that can occur to anyone at any time, you know, and
Yes.
particularly with your experienced staff, and in my world, the experienced drivers, they tend to feel that they've got good fatigue management strategies. Oh yeah, that's for the young guys. Oh yeah, you know, that doesn't impact me. I've been doing this for 20 years or whatever it might be. But sadly, when we look at that footage of microsleeps and when we look at the data, and whether that's insurance data, fatigue data, whatever, it does show that fatigue events are happening to everyone, and at all different times of the day, right?
It's exactly. You know, if we go from a sleep medicine point of view, we're going to have our circadian rhythm that's going to step in and cause for some fatigue events. We're going to have what we call a morning dip and an afternoon dip. On top of that, we're then going to have fatigue, which is, some will say it's sleepiness, but the sleepiness that you have of nighttime, when you wake up, you feel relieved. That's sleepiness. Fatigue is it's the body's response to either sleep debt, which is very, very common and a main cause of fatigue, or physical and mental exhaustion. And so there's no universal definition of fatigue, and very most likely people refer to it as sleepiness. But if you have a sleep overnight and you wake up and then you're having micro sleeps within 2 hours of driving, that is fatigue. And the statistics are out there that our GPs, 10 to 20% of their cases are actually daily, you know, people coming in seeking help for their fatigue. So again, it's usually a family member that's recognizing this before it's yourself.
Sure. And I know that often presents in other health problems, doesn't it? When actually fatigue is one of the underlying issues that's contributing.
Most definitely. So there is a report as well that came out from Australia a little while ago, reporting that it's up to about 40% of transport drivers or long travelling drivers that are most likely got undiagnosed sleep apnea, which again is another huge contributor to causing fatigue, because it's to do with our sleep quality and quantity. And out of that, we also know if you've got an undiagnosed sleep disorder, and more so giving you fatigue, what's going to be happening is you're going to have medical issues going on, including high blood pressure and pre-diabetes or diabetic. But the scariest thing is you're also more likely, about 20 to 30% higher chance of having a mental illness, such as anxiety or depression. And so it's just a big mixed bag of things that are going on that, again, if you've had this for quite some time, you're not able to recognize and see through that that's not normal. But it's what I love about my job, whether it's to do with sleep testing that we do at Fit for Duty, and then offering treatments, or whether it's just about educating our community, educating New Zealand about what is fatigue and what it does look like. And it's a good thing to talk about it. It's not going to be frowned upon. It's no longer, the trophy effect where you're the one that's only had 3 hours sleep. It's been turned around now in sleep medicine that actually we know just how bad it is for your health, and we know how bad it is for your mental health.
That link to mental health is super interesting because it's widely recognised Christmas is a dangerous time of the year anyway. And in transport and logistics, where we have a role that's very isolated, unsocial hours, traveling long distance to be away from family and whatnot. I guess the takeaway for the audience on the call today is these things are present for your team all times of the year, but they can be exacerbated over the peak period because of the holidays, because of that cumulative effect, because of the already maybe predilection to some mental health issues because of being the holidays and family dynamics for people or whatnot. So just being aware of that, normalizing it, making sure reinforcing those messages with your team, and then the so what is what we're going to talk about for the rest of the call today. We've just had a question come through, Katrina, that seems like a good time to jump to. And that is, while the driver may have managed their driving hours correctly post-incident, how could you measure that fatigue had played a factor in the incident, and what can we do? And I presume in this instance, they don't have a fatigue monitoring system like Guardian in place. So what advice would you give for that?
And I would say that exact thing. And this is why we're developing, I guess, applications of helping us with the fatigue, because again, it's so common to have these micro sleeps where you don't even recognize that they're happening. There's also out from America, saliva testing that's proving and can indicate you've actually got fatigue levels, which is very exciting. And I'm confident Fit for Duty will eventually jump on board with that, because I think just like a breathalyzer, right? You can just see black and white what's going on with there. Fit for Duty also do, I guess it's alertness monitoring. And so there's an app that you can download with staff members. And if you feel like you've worked too many hours, even from a family environment, if you're going to do a trip wherever away with the family on holidays, you can just take this quick 60-minute cognitive test, and it will quite quickly again evaluate whether you are fatigued or not. And so I'd say for anyone that's had an event with what they do think was fatigue or not fatigue, or they're not sure, it goes back to the sleep again. It goes back to, are you getting enough sleep? We want you to have about 7 hours of sleep for your physical, mental, and cognitive health. And also, if you then say you're having enough sleep, have you got an undiagnosed sleep disorder? Obstructive sleep apnea is when your airways, you start with a snore. And a saying I like to use is, don't ignore the snore. Usually that is sleep apnea of some type. So what will happen is your airways will close on themselves. You won't breathe for up to 90 seconds sometimes. Then your brain's going to wake you up to take a breath, and you're going to sort of be disturbed out of your sleep, and then it's going to happen hundreds of times over the night. So again, you really want to tick that box of, are you getting enough sleep? Is the sleep quality? And then we go to the finer details, I guess, to find out whether it was fatigue or not, with other things that are happening that we can assess.
So I think that's some really great examples of the support that you can put in place post-incident. But for the person that asked the question, really, if you don't have a driver monitoring system in the cab, and so you're not able to capture factually whether it is a fatigue event until we get saliva testing, which is, wow, that's an interesting technology. We probably have to lean on the traditional method of the post-event interview, which is where, as you said, you're looking at those various factors, which is somewhat subjective. It's not, a conclusive method to.
And sorry to cut you off, Kelly, but I encourage that person to reach out to me, because fatigue and sleep, They go together, and there's such a complex issue. It could actually be sleep hygiene. It could be, are you having too much caffeine at night and that's disturbing your sleep and you don't realize this? Or so I do encourage anybody, reach out by email, because there could be some tips and tricks that we can be giving you. And maybe it was fatigue and maybe we can't prove that. But
Mm.
like as you're talking about the Guardian, it's now's the time would be great to start installing some of these devices that will actually warn you before the event happens. And then, as I've said, often you don't know it's been happening. So to get that black and white indication, not only is
Yeah.
it going to save lives, but it's going to show you just how, again, alert you to, we need to look at other
Yeah,
things that's
sure.
going on there.
Mm. And so let's kind of move on now to how a company can respond. And in this busy time, first of all, I'm impressed so many people managed to come to today's webinar because it is so busy for many transport operators.
Yeah.
But knowing that this is such a risk, how do we actually respond? So one of the things that we traditionally talk about is having a fatigue management policy in place, and making sure that you have already rolled out your training, you've rolled out your policies and procedures. This is the critical time of year, right, to be refreshing that stuff and making sure that people are aware of what's in place, et cetera, et cetera.
Most definitely. And like you said, the statistics are out showing that November is our high fatigue season. And so, but, like you and I have been both surprised by this, we would generally have thought by the end of the Christmas, you've had the children, you've had all the events going into January, work kicks back up again for some, or for others, they've had to do extra shifts because other colleagues are on holidays. And so, like you've just said, right now is the best time to start some of that conversation again from a company point of view, that it can again have that ripple effect down to managers, and so on, those out on the road.
So one of the examples of that, Katrina, I think I've shared with you before, is we've got access to some really great material out of Australia, some social media tiles that are coming out from the National Road Safety Partnership Program. And these are just really cool little pictures that have quite sharp, hard-hitting reminder messages about the risk of fatigue, the risk of driving when you're sleepy, the risk of driving when you're emotional, just quite cool reminders like that. Because I think it's easy for us to say, remind people about fatigue,
Yes.
but actually, to some degree with safety messages, sometimes particularly health and safety managers feel like a broken record, that no one's
Yes.
listening to them. So one of the things I would encourage is try to get a bit creative with the way that you're communicating. And I love these social media tiles. Happy to share those with everybody, where to access those. Putting little things like that out on your Facebook page, popping reminders out through your tablet notification, let's say if you were using eRoad or something similar, WhatsApp messages. So it's the reminder, it's the awareness, but then the flip side is the greater level of monitoring and the greater level of support, right?
So true. And something that's coming to mind is my parents have actually just recently flown over from Perth. They did the, midnight flight. And again, it goes back to that. We can change the way. It does sound like a broken record, of, we know what fatigue is, but and we don't feel like we're fatigued, but play a new game with yourself. Keep an eye on a work colleague or a family member and start looking for those common signs and symptoms of fatigue. And for instance, my dad was saying, oh, I'm a shift worker. I've driven trains my whole life at night. I'm not tired. And I was just watching him. He was fidgeting and he was yawning and he was wanting, sweet food. And it's like, Dad, you just need to go home and sleep now. Like, no more food, And so, again, it's like that in the workplace with our education. It's like, well, change it a bit. Actually make it more like, can you spot anyone that you're working with or a family member that's showing symptoms?
And that's great education to be giving to your dispatch and your allocators. One of the really cool ideas that one of my other customers did is, rather than fit for duty declarations at the start of a shift, the dispatch or the office would actually FaceTime the driver, and they'd be like, "Hey, how's it going?" Because actually laying eyes on someone was a very different way of engaging with them, of doing a check-in. It was more genuine, and they were actually able to physically see what the status of that person was, as opposed to just, are you okay? Yes, tick,
I
which is,
love it.
yeah, I thought it was really working for that company to create a culture where if the driver wasn't okay, they actually felt they could have a more genuine conversation and say so, and say, actually, nah, I had a rubbish night's sleep last night. My little one was up all night, or ate too many Christmas chocolates, or whatever it might be. So I think that monitoring and support is important in a real genuine way. One of the other things the data tells us, correct me if I'm wrong, is that a lot of fatigue events happen actually when people are returning from holiday as well. So in the first 2 hours of the shift, or when you're coming back after an extended break, I guess because we party or live it up on our time off, and then we're having to settle back into new patterns. Have I got that right?
Most definitely. We know as well that hydration is another one of those we get preached to the cows come home about eating right and drinking water, but truly it is so linked to our body's responses that having even just being short by a little bit of water is that one of the first symptoms you're going to get is drowsiness. So again, while we're on holidays, or like you say, we're at the beach, we're dehydrating a little bit, drinking, we're well rested, I would hope. But then you're going back to work, and all of a sudden, everything's just out of whack for you. And again, if it's the end of the year, we're sort of almost at that burnout type stage if we haven't been taking care of ourselves during the year.
What a fantastic potential Christmas gift for organisations that are trying to encourage their teams to stay well hydrated. It's one of the things that we've put up on the Harm Free website. It's a very simple intervention around people's physical health, is just make some branded company water bottles, preferably
Yes.
the ones with a straw so people can sip out of them instead of obscuring their view from the road when they drink. But something so simple as that is a good way of encouraging your people to stay hydrated, or providing freezable ice blocks that go inside the water bottle, or even if you're feeling really generous, putting in the 12-volt powered mini fridges or mini heater boxes that you can get from Repco or somewhere like that for about 60 or 70 bucks. All great ways to encourage people to stay hydrated over the period. Having bottles of water in the fridge in the smoker room that people can grab,
And
all.
again, sorry, Kelly, but again, we're talking about your work colleagues or your managers or your supervisors. You're off to shift. Have you got your water bottle today? Just being in that habit of grabbing a 1.5 litre water bottle and sipping on your shift. And also, we go back to this time of the year when, a lot of our transport drivers, they're doing long hours and they're lonely hours. And sometimes this is not a nice time of the year to be on your own, out on the road, when you've got other, family members or what have you, either with us this year, or you're not able to be physically in the same room as some of your loved ones. And so, again, reach out to our people out on the road. Just let them know you're thinking of them if you know that they're doing, especially the Christmas shift, or doing those extra shifts while you're on holidays. Just remember just how lonely sometimes those long shifts can be, especially at this time of the year.
Take myself off mute, sorry. The other thing worth probably mentioning is the fatigue intervention plans. So this is something that we see businesses implement quite often when they put a driver monitoring system in to say, well, when our drivers have a fatigue event, these are the actions that we're going to take. In all reality, I do see the adherence to those fatigue intervention plans really taper off. People get complacent and they get used to the system, and but now is a great opportunity to go back to your data, review the patterns and the trends that you're already seeing, and refresh people on that fatigue intervention plan. And this is what I want you to do to be supporting our people. I think that's really, really important. So look, just one of the other things we talked about in preparation, I know that we mentioned fatigue impacting managers early on the call, but there's another user group that we forget about sometimes in transport, and that's where driving is not the core task of their role, right?
So true. Fatigue is just one of these things that is just incredibly common, and it's to do with physical and mental exhaustion as well as lack of sleep. So just because you're not working night shifts or doing extended shifts, it does not mean that you're not by any means going to skip this and not be hit by fatigue. It is across all levels, and again, it's just about looking after each other. It doesn't matter what role you play in your organization. Just be mindful of others and be mindful of yourself and how you're feeling every day.
And I think one aspect of that is even when people finish shift and then get in their personal car to drive home, is still,
Yes.
obviously with the duty of care for our people, that's another quite important risk period. So in terms of advice to the fleet managers or health and safety managers with their teams, we put together a couple of top tips in preparing for this, and I think we've covered them, but perhaps if I just summarize those up. The first is acknowledging the risk and understanding this time of year. And you can do that by reviewing your own data, reviewing the industry data that we've referenced, but actually understanding what is the risk for you and your business and your teams. Secondly, just that awareness campaign, reminding people that fatigue is human. It can happen to Johnny because his neighbours had a loud, rowdy party. It could happen to so-and-so because they've got health issues. It is something that could happen to any of us at any time. And it happens to experienced drivers just as much as it happens to the newbies. And then the next bit is refreshing those tips for self-management, like you touched on, Katrina, with the importance of hydration and good nutrition, the importance of taking breaks. Anyone who's chatted to us before knows we often hammer home about the NASA nap, that
Yes.
if you are fatigued, you can try the coffee, you can try the window down, you can try the stretching, but the reality is the only thing that will actually really address that fatigue is sleep. And so the best thing you can do is encourage your team to find somewhere to pull over and have that short, sharp sleep to try to bring themselves back into a safe to drive perspective. We've referenced in today's call the harm-free transport and logistics program. I'll also pop a link up to that in the chat. If you're not aware of it, this is one of the initiatives that Katrina's predecessor and the rest of the fleet team are involved in. And it's really about looking at the way that work is managed and designed and trying to look at some of those risk factors that create harm for our drivers. And obviously sleep and fatigue is absolutely featured in that really, really highly. So if you're not aware of the harm-free program, I've just popped a link in there, worth going to have a look. The last thing that I just was wanting to end on, Katrina, based on your experience, what is the one thing that you would say to people that are reticent to look at their sleep issues or reticent to believe that they might have sleep issues? I think I loved your one before, don't ignore the snore. But any final advice, particularly for our managers who have to influence others to take this really seriously? Any final advice?
Again, I think it's a bit like talking about it, having this amazing culture where we can talk about fatigue and we talk about how is your sleep and talk amongst ourselves. What are you doing with your sleep? And quite quickly we get a lot of sleep disorder talking, particularly again sleep apnea, because it is so common and it's life-changing once you get treatment. It truly is. And so you should be prioritizing your sleep. It should be non-negotiable 7+ hours. And again, it should be along the culture of just being, it's okay to put your hand up and say, I need help. Because if you're not waking up feeling refreshed, it is not normal. You should wake up feeling a bit like a box of birds, like me.
Fantastic. All right, well, thank you very much. That is today's final lunch and learn for the year. As I said, you can see the recordings up on the Success Formula website of the past ones. Just one final thing to end the call on today. If you haven't seen this, I spotted it this morning about trucking along from the NZ Trucking Association. It was an excellent little holiday checklist. If you're looking for a picture to share with your team, I thought this was just really a beautiful, short, sharp, cool message to send out to your drivers and to the rest of your team. Great. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for coming along. Much appreciated. Wishing you a very, very safe and restful holiday period. And hopefully we all get a bit of sunshine this year. We certainly deserve it. Thanks a lot, Katrina.
Thank you. Merry Christmas, everybody.
Cheers.
Bye.